Today, as part of our expert series, we have a guest with us, and he is Mr. James Logan. James is based out of Sydney, Australia, and he's a customer reference leader, having worked in many companies like Microsoft, HP, and VMware. He's going to talk about the importance of customer success stories as part of the reference program in the companies that he has worked for, and also share some best practices and challenges based on his experience. Let me just turn it on to James. James, over to you.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for that introduction. It's been an interesting path to get to this customer advocacy, customer evidence, customer reference role. And I think my background across a number of global B2B organizations, you mentioned some of them, but prior to that I was also working in large enterprise organizations in technical roles. So I've been both a consumer of technology and a provider of technology. And I think having that experience as a consumer of technology and being a referee myself in some large organizations has given me quite an insight into how to build good reference material and how to make it appealing, how to break through the noise, and how to connect with prospective customers.
We've all seen the transformation of sales and marketing, where you have more and more importance of marketing in the overall selling process. And according to research and estimates, you can say that around 60 to 80% of the decision is taken well before the prospect gets to meet with the sales teams. So keeping that in mind, and in the context of customer success stories, what do you think is the importance, and what do you have seen happening in the field? What is your perspective?
It's a great question, and the landscape is changing rapidly. The internet is a wonderful thing, and it's provided an incredible amount of information at people's fingertips. And certainly the search engines out there these days are incredibly powerful. And as you say, these days your customers probably know more about your products than you do in an organization. They've already done their research, they've got the data sheets, they've got the carefully curated content that you put out there. And by the time they engage, typically they don't want to hear from you anymore. They've got all of the information. They may want pricing details, bundling, packaging, enterprise agreement, opportunities, and those sorts of things. But by the time they end up contacting the reps, what they're interested in is the real world business benefits of the products and services that are being offered, and some evidence to support that. And more customer evidence is playing that critical role. It's most B2B software or services these days are highly competitive environments. There are many players out there, all fighting for the same share of wallet. And really it comes down to proof points these days. So to your question, customer evidence is critical, particularly at the final areas of the sales cycle. It's very important, and will be the difference between closing a sale and not, and the difference between you picking up the sale and that sale going to a competitor.
What are the different kinds of content that could be created from a customer evidence perspective, from a customer success perspective, and what are the usages? How do you typically use them in a typical B2B scenario?
Yeah. There's a really wide range of collateral types and formats available these days, and they all have different applicability to different points in the sales cycle. There's no one size fits all, and I think that's an important thing for people looking to build customer evidence and testimonial content, that it's a multifaceted scenario. So your typical PDF case studies will get you to a certain place along your sales cycle, so to a certain stage in your sales methodology, but it will go no further. Their impact, for example, decreases as you get to the pointy end of the sales cycle, while the impact of some other pieces of customer evidence will increase as you get to the pointy end of the sales cycle. So I like to break down customer evidence into two broad categories. One I call market reference material, which is all of your collateral. So it's things, it's PDF, it's case studies, it's videos, it's podcasts, it's quotes, it's all of that curated content. It doesn't necessarily matter how it's communicated, but it's all that stuff that you build, it's all that content you create. The other broad category I like to use, which I think is the most exciting and interesting and also very emerging category, is what I call peer assets or peer references. And that's the ability for you in the sales process to join a prospect with an existing customer in a conversation. You don't curate it, you don't control it, but that conversation will close a deal. If you can get your prospect to talk to a satisfied customer, that content and that conversation will be wide-ranging. It will cover pros and cons. It's not curated by the vendor. Hopefully the customer is saying the right things, but it gives that prospect, the person who is after the reference information, up-to-date information, the successes and failures of the customer's deployment, and also real-world scenarios about business benefits and business outcomes. So two broad scenarios: market references, which is stuff, things, and peer references, which are people.
So, James, what you're necessarily trying to say is that customer evidence is important all through the conversion funnel, starting from searching for information all the way down to the closure of the sales cycle. Unlike earlier days, now it's because of the internet, because of the social networking, people are looking for stuff, looking for evidence, looking for proof points for doing anything with the company, starting with very high, beginning of the funnel to the end of the funnel. So you have different kinds of content, and you talked about the two different kinds, saying that one is the marketing side of things and the second is the sales side of things. So, and it makes a lot of sense, is that more and more, so you need the marketing side and you need the sales side, and they're two different animals, because in the marketing side, it's
I would agree to disagree on that. I think we are all in sales. The only reason we exist is to sell our products and services. That's it. And I think it's a little easy for people to sometimes forget that. The reason that they're there is to support sales. That's
Absolutely.
it. So I try not to use that distinction between marketing and sales, and that's why I decided to try and introduce a different taxonomy, which was peer references and market references. So trying to break down that distinction between sales and marketing. We're all here to sell software. That's the only reason we're here.
Now, you did bring up an interesting point, though. You talked about PDF case studies, and I know you've written a blog article about it and has a discussion thread going on about the death of PDF case studies. Now, what exactly do you mean? And could you elaborate a little bit on PDFs and case studies?
In my role as a regional manager of a reference program, producing content is clearly one of the KPIs, and typically content would be something like a 2 to 3 page case study, on a corporate template, with some graphic and design elements and those sorts of things, and it would be in a PDF format. And don't get me wrong, PDFs are great. I love them. I have all the creation and publishing tools. I use them extensively. I think they're great containers for content. But back in about 2012, I noticed that the inbound device types connecting to our corporate website, more than half of them were mobile devices. And trying to read a typical PDF, corporate PDF case study on a mobile device is a horrendous experience. It's just awful. You end up with pages all over the place and scrolling. You have to pinch and zoom and carry on. It's terrible. And it got me thinking that maybe as a group of professionals, we need to look at some alternative solutions for delivering that great content. And perhaps the PDF format was fine for the print and distribution world, but the world has changed. And certainly with the introduction of smartphones and tablets, information is being consumed very, very differently to the old desktop and print kind of paradigm that was the birth of that gave birth to PDFs. So in my blog, I kind of I presented this as a conjecture. Is the PDF dead? And I think it's a valid container still for content, but we have to, but as our marketing professionals, we have to deliver content at the right time to the right people. And PDFs just aren't delivering content to the right people anymore, particularly executives who are wedded to their smartphones and tablets. You rarely see executives and decision makers in front of desktops these days. So as a professional group, we need to come up with a better solution. We need to be able to come up with some kind of universal container, like the PDF was, but a container that in some way, somehow, formats nicely on tablets and smartphones. The problem at the moment is, and I don't have a solution for this, I can do it. I can go to an agency and we can do a custom website with cascading style sheets and HTML5 and all sorts of stuff. That's really expensive. It's a maintenance nightmare, and it's really a bespoke solution, whereas the PDF was this beautiful universal solution. So really, I'm quite concerned about it as a professional. How do I deliver my content to people that want to see it in a way they can read it? And the PDF isn't doing that for me anymore.
Yeah, I think you brought in a really good point. And I totally agree with the fact that more and more people are reading stuff in the smartphones and tablets, and less on desktop, because desktop, I mean, even as per research by Google itself, desktops are more for serious work, where you're spending a lot of hours and doing serious work.
Yeah.
And smartphones are the ones where you glance through things and quick things, and tablets are more of leisure reading. So
Indeed, and I think I couldn't imagine using my iPad to use InDesign. I love InDesign, I love Illustrator, they're great products. My workstation is two 24-inch monitors, and that's how I create my content, high res, color calibrated, all that sort of stuff. I don't consume information though on my desktop. I will go to my iPad or my smartphone to consume information these days. So it's really interesting when you look at, the desktop used to be a one-size-fits-all device, content creation, content consumption. Now the workstations are still great tools for creating content, and although it's changing quite quickly, but tablets and smartphones are the way that people consume content these days. So whatever we do with our content, we have to make sure that it is consumable on these small form factor devices.
Absolutely. So if I want to summarize what you're saying is that customer success content, customer evidence is very important. It's much more important than what it used to be now because of consumption across the funnel. At the same time, we are lacking behind in terms of giving it to the right audience in the right format or consumable format because of limitations like this. So you have a demand, you have the supply, but there is a gap in the way you would render stuff to people just because it's not conducive to glance through or to skip to look at stuff. So
and a great example was I can create my corporate InDesign template in an hour, start to finish, we're done. And I can hand that template to any content creation agency in the world, and they will be able to flow content into that template. And I end up with a PDF document. What we need is that workflow for the web, and I'm yet to find a good solution.
Now last piece of this, do you have any best practices that you want to call out? You did talk about some of them in the course of the discussion. Is there anything that you want to shout out?
Well, I think as professionals, we need to make sure that we are actually providing content that people will consume. It's pretty easy to belt out any number of case studies and just tick the box. But is the content compelling, and does it resonate with customers? Now, here's the thing. Customers don't want to hear from the vendor. They really don't. By the time they contact the vendor, they've done all their homework. They've got all the white papers, all of the, again, carefully curated, cherry-picked material that they need. What they want is real-world examples of the business outcomes of products and solutions. And the temptation in content is to write all about me, all about my software, all about my company, all about the great things I do. That won't get any sales traction. I've actually got to write about the success of our customers. And one way to do that is to make sure that there's some human interest element to it. How did this person succeed? How did it help them? Did it help them professionally in their organization? How did it help their organization? What were the business outcomes and business benefits? And certainly in my organizations, when I've got my checklist of potential reference content to develop, if there's no business outcome, it's a non-starter. And that can horrify product managers because they're so desperate to get content out there about their products. But if there's no outcome, there's no point in just putting words on a page. There has to be a demonstrable business outcome. And I typically like to talk to 2 or 3 people in the organization. So the practitioners who were responsible for the actual implementation, the project managers who had to oversee the deployment, and also the sponsor. Who signed the check and why did they sign the check, and what are their expectations and how have those expectations been met? If we can get quotes from all of those 3, the story writes itself. One of the really easy ways to check this is I like to do a word cloud of the content that's been created. So I'll get some content back from an agency and I'll go online and I'll drop it into one of the word cloud generators. And if my company's name is at the top of the list, the content goes back. It's like, try again. It's not about me, it's about the customer. So, in all seriousness, do some frequency analysis of the content. How many times does it mention you as a vendor? It should be once or twice. I mean, it's on the vendor's paper, it's on the template, it's probably got the corporate logo, it's got the corporate colors. Customers can figure out who the vendor is without it being every second word in every second paragraph. So really make the content about the customers and their success and their business outcomes.
Thank you so much, James. It was nice talking to you.
My
I think there's a lot of valuable inputs here that could be useful for everyone. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a
My
good
pleasure.
day.